Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The grind of steel against steel still rang in Rhett Maddox's ears as he pulled his pickup into the driveway. 16 hours straight at the fabrication plant. His hands ached from gripping tools. His back screamed from hunching over metal beams. But he was home. The porch light cast a warm glow across the front steps. Through the kitchen window, he could see movement. Lainey putting dishes away. Normal. Safe. Rhett grabbed his lunchbox and tool bag from the passenger seat. His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked toward the house. The familiar sounds of home greeted him, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of the television. The front door swung open before he could reach for the handle. Dad! Bodie crashed into his legs, arms wrapping around his waist. 9 years old and all energy. His sandy hair stuck up in 3 directions, and chocolate smudged the corner of his mouth. Hey, buddy. Rhett dropped his tool bag and ruffled his son's hair. What's got you so excited? Mom sent me cookies. Bodie held up a chocolate chip cookie, half-eaten. They're really good. Try one. Rhett looked over his son's head toward the kitchen table. An open box sat there, white cardboard with a local bakery logo. A pink note lay beside it. Lainey's handwriting visible from where he stood. His stomach clenched. Something felt wrong. Lainey appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in her hands. Hey, honey, how was work? Fine. Rhett couldn't take his eyes off the box. Where'd the cookies come from? The bakery on Pine Street. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I thought Bodie would like them. Bodie took another bite of his cookie. They taste different than usual, but good different. The wrongness hit Rhett like a punch to the gut. The bakery on Pine Street had been closed for 2 months. He'd driven past it every day on his way to work. Boarded up windows, foreclosure notice on the door. Bodie. His voice came out sharper than he intended. Spit it out. What? Bodie laughed, cookie crumbs falling from his mouth. Spit it out. Now. Bodie spit it out. Rhett lunged forward, grabbing his son's shoulders. Bodie's eyes went wide with shock and fear. Rhett, what's wrong with you? Lainey stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. How much did you eat? Rhett turned Bodie's face toward him, searching his eyes. How many cookies? Just 1.5. Bodie's voice shook. Dad, you're scaring me. Rhett's hands moved to Bodie's mouth, fingers trying to scrape out any remaining cookie. His son pulled back, tears starting to form. This is insane, Lainey said. They're just cookies. No. Rhett stood, his mind racing. The bakery's been closed for months. Lainey's face went pale. For just a second, her composed mask slipped. I must have gotten them somewhere else. I don't remember. Dad. Bodie's voice sounded smaller now. My tummy hurts. Rhett looked down. His son's face had gone ashen. Sweat beaded on his forehead. We're going to the hospital. Rhett scooped Bodie into his arms. Now, you're overreacting, Lainey said, but she was already reaching for her purse. I'm sure he's fine. Rhett didn't answer. He carried Bodie to the truck, his son's body feeling heavier with each step. Behind them, he heard Lainey's footsteps on the gravel. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights and sharp turns. Rhett pushed the speedometer past 70 on residential streets, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Bodie lay across the bench seat, his head in Rhett's lap. His breathing had gone shallow, his skin clammy to the touch. Stay with me, buddy, Rhett whispered, one hand on the wheel, the other stroking his son's hair. We're almost there. Just hold on. Bodie's eyes fluttered open. Dad, I feel really sick. I know, son. The doctors are going to help you. Rhett's voice cracked. Remember when you had that fever last winter? The doctors made you feel better then, right? Yeah. Bodie's voice was barely a whisper. Will you stay with me? I'm not going anywhere. I promise. The hospital emergency room doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Rhett burst through carrying Bodie, shouting for help. Nurses appeared instantly, wheeling out a gurney, asking rapid-fire questions he struggled to answer coherently. In the emergency room. Everything happened too fast and too slow at the same time. Nurses took Bodie from his arms, their movements efficient and urgent. A doctor with graying hair and kind eyes approached, clipboard in hand. I'm Dr. Martinez. What did your son ingest? Cookies, Rhett said, following the gurney down a bright hallway. Chocolate chip cookies. My wife said they were from a bakery, but that place has been closed for months. How many? When? 1.5. Maybe 20 minutes ago. Rhett watched as they transferred Bodhi to a hospital bed, his small body dwarfed by the equipment surrounding him. They worked with practiced precision. A nurse inserted in 4-line, while another checked vitals. Dr. Martinez examined Bodhi's eyes with a small flashlight, asked him to stick out his tongue. We're going to pump his stomach, the doctor explained to Rhett. Try to get out whatever's still there. This might be uncomfortable for him. Do it, Rhett said without hesitation. The next hour was a nightmare of beeping machines and worried faces. They pushed activated charcoal through the tube in Bodhi's nose, trying to absorb whatever poison remained in his system. Started medications to protect his liver and kidneys. But with each passing minute, his son's color grew more ashen, his responses weaker. Mr. Maddox, a doctor in green scrubs, approached him in the waiting room. Her face told him everything before she spoke. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. The words hit him like a physical blow. The waiting room spun around him, sounds becoming muffled and distant. The toxicology report will take a few days, the doctor continued. But preliminary tests suggest poisoning. Something in the food he consumed. Poisoning. The word echoed in his head, growing louder with each repetition. Where's my son? His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hollow and broken. Would you like to see him? Rhett nodded, not trusting his voice. Bodhi looked peaceful in the hospital bed, like he was sleeping. His sandy hair lay flat against his forehead, the way it did after his bath. Rhett reached out and touched his hand. Cold. So cold. Dad. He turned. Lainey stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She moved toward the bed, her steps hesitant. Oh, Bodhi. She reached for their son's other hand. I'm so sorry, baby. Rhett watched her face, searching for something real in her grief. The tears were there, but something felt performed about them. Practiced that a nurse entered quietly. Take all the time you need, she said softly. Lainey leaned over the bed, but she didn't hug Bodhi. Didn't kiss his forehead. Just stood there, one hand on his arm, crying silent tears. The nurse was right, she never hugged the body. The funeral arrangements blurred together in a haze of paperwork and condolences. Rhett moved through it all like a sleepwalker, answering questions he didn't really hear, making decisions that didn't matter anymore. Lainey handled most of it. She was good at that, talking to people, making arrangements, being the grieving mother everyone expected her to be. But Rhett watched her, and the performance never stopped feeling like just that. 3 days after Bodhi died, she left the house after dinner. I need some air, she said, grabbing her purse. This house, it's too much right now. Rhett nodded from his chair in the living room. He'd been sitting there for hours, staring at Bodhi's art supplies on the coffee table. Crayons and colored pencils scattered across construction paper drawings of dinosaurs and rockets. After Lainey's car pulled out of the driveway, he waited 10 minutes. Then he followed. She didn't go to the park, didn't drive to her sister's house or the grocery store. She went downtown to the Marriott on Commerce Street. Rhett parked across the street and watched as she walked through the lobby doors. Confident, purposeful, not like a woman whose son had just died, that he waited in the truck for 2 hours. When she finally emerged, she wasn't alone. The man beside her was tall, well-dressed. Expensive suit, perfect haircut. They stood close together by the valet stand, his hand on the small of her back as they waited for their cars. Rhett recognized him. Travis Kane. He'd seen the name in the society pages of a local paper, usually attached to phrases like pharmaceutical consultant and generous donor. The kind of man who belonged in hotel lobbies and country clubs. The kind of man Lainey had always said she deserved. They didn't kiss goodbye, but the intimacy between them was unmistakable. The way she touched his arm, the way he leaned close to whisper something that made her smile point 3 days after their son's funeral. And she was smiling. Rhett followed her home, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. His hands gripped the steering wheel, so tight his knuckles went white. When they both pulled into the driveway, Lainey got out of her car with red eyes and a tissue in her hand. The grieving mother again. How was your drive? He asked as they walked to the front door. Peaceful. I just needed to clear my head. She dabbed at her eyes. This is all so hard. Rhett unlocked the door and held it open for her. Yeah, it is. That night, he lay awake listening to her breathe beside him. Even in sleep, she seemed to be performing grief. Too still, too peaceful for a woman who'd lost her child days ago. The next morning, Rhett called in sick to work. Lainey left for her job at the insurance office, kissing his forehead and promising to pick up groceries on her way home. After her car disappeared down the street, Rhett went to their home office. Their joint bank account showed the first red flag. A withdrawal for $45,000, made 2 weeks before Bodhi died. The memo line was blank. Rhett stared at the computer screen, his coffee growing cold in his hand. $45,000. More than half their savings. He dug deeper. Phone records showed calls to a number he didn't recognize. Dozens of them over the past 3 months, usually during his work hours. The credit card statements were worse. Charges at restaurants he'd never been to. A hotel in Spokane. Gas purchases that didn't match her normal routine. But it was the insurance paperwork that made his blood run cold. A new life insurance policy on Bodhi. $250,000. Signed 4 months ago. Rhett's hand shook as he printed the documents. The signature was definitely Lainey's, flowing script he'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for 12 years. But she'd never mentioned the policy. Never asked him to sign anything. He scrolled through their email history, searching for any mention of insurance agents or policy updates. Nothing. The policy had been purchased entirely without his knowledge, using forged documents that showed his consent. The beneficiary was listed as Lainey Maddox's spouse. But there was a secondary beneficiary that made his blood freeze. Travis Kane, family friend. If something happened to both parents, Travis would receive the money they'd planned for every possibility. Even the chance that their murder plot might go wrong and take out both targets. His phone buzzed. A text from Nell Brody, his friend from work. Heard you're out sick. You okay? Need anything? Rhett stared at the message for a long moment. Nell had worked beside him for 8 years, knew him better than most people. She'd been at Bodhi's birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family barbecues. She'd watched him become a father, seen him light up every time his son walked into the room. And she was one of the few people who knew Lainey well enough to see through her act. He typed back, "Can you come over? Need to talk. It's important. On my way." Nell arrived within an hour, still wearing her work boots and safety vest. Oil stains marked her hands, and her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She took one look at his face and frowned. "You look like hell," she said, settling into the kitchen chair across from him. "When's the last time you ate something?" "I can't remember." "Sleep." "Same." Nell studied his face with the same attention she gave to blueprint measurements at work. Precise, methodical, missing nothing. "Talk to me, Rhett. What's going on?" Bodhi didn't die by accident. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from fire. Nell's expression shifted from concern to something harder, more focused. "What do you mean?" Rhett spread the papers across the table. Bank statements, phone records, insurance documents. The evidence of his wife's betrayal laid out like a puzzle he wished he couldn't solve. "She's been planning this for months." His voice came out flat, emotionless. "The cookies were meant for me." Nell studied the papers, her jaw tightening with each page. When she looked up, her eyes were dark with anger. "This insurance policy," she said, pointing to the document. $250,000. Signed 4 months ago. I never knew about it. And this withdrawal. She tapped the bank statement. 45 grand. What's that for? Setting up her new life. With him. Rhett pulled up Travis Kane's photo on his phone, showed it to Nell. She studied the image. Pharmaceutical consultant. I've seen his name in the paper. Charity galas, society bullshit. She's been meeting him for months. The hotel charges, the restaurant bills. All while I was working double shifts to save for Bodhi's college fund. Nell leaned back in her chair, processing everything. She'd known Rhett since high school, had watched him meet Lainey, marry her, become a father. She'd seen the way his face lit up when he talked about Bodhi's latest art project or science experiment. "You sure about this?" she asked finally. "The bakery's been closed for 2 months. The insurance policy. The money." Rhett rubbed his face with both hands. "I saw them together 3 nights ago. At the Marriott. 3 nights after the funeral." "Yeah." Nell was quiet for a long moment, her calloused hands flat on the table. She'd worked construction before moving to steel fabrication, had dealt with dangerous men and toxic situations. But this was different. This was family. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Rhett looked at the scattered papers, then at the empty cookie box still sitting on the counter. His son's last meal, meant to be his. Burn it all down. Travis Kane had a routine. Every Tuesday, he drove to Spokane for a pharmaceutical conference at the Davenport Hotel. 3 hours of presentations, networking, and deals that kept his consulting firm profitable. Rhett had been watching for 2 weeks, learning the pattern. Travis always arrived by noon, always parked in the same section of the garage, always stayed until the evening reception ended. Today would be different. Rhett sat in the hotel lobby, nursing a cup of coffee and reading a newspaper. Just another business traveler killing time. His baseball cap was pulled low, a fake visitor badge from some made-up company clipped to his shirt. The T-1215, Travis walked through the lobby doors. Confident stride, expensive suit, briefcase in hand. He checked in at the conference desk and headed toward the ballroom. Rhett waited 5 minutes, then followed. The conference was exactly what he'd expected pharmaceutical reps and consultants talking about: market penetration and profit margins. Travis sat in the third row, taking notes and schmoozing with the people around him. While Travis listened to a presentation about new diabetes medications, Rhett took the elevator to the 7th floor, room 714. Travis's suite, booked under his company name. Rhett had learned a lot about locks during his years in steel fabrication. You needed to understand security systems when you worked around expensive equipment and materials. Hotel key cards were trickier than mechanical locks, but not impossible. Especially when you had the right tools and patience. That he pulled a small device from his pocket, a card reader programmer he bought online under a fake name. The technology was readily available if you knew where to look. Hotel security was often more about deterring casual theft than stopping someone with real determination. The door clicked open after 3 minutes of careful work. Travis's suite was immaculate. Expensive clothes hung in the closet, organized by color and style. Italian leather shoes lined up beneath them, each pair worth more than Rhett made in a week. A laptop sat open on the desk, connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi, displaying email threads about pharmaceutical contracts and profit margins. Rhett worked quickly but carefully, photographing everything that might be useful later. He found Travis's calendar, noting upcoming meetings and travel plans. Bank statements showed massive deposits from various pharmaceutical companies, along with expensive personal purchases, jewelry, restaurant bills, hotel rooms. The listening device went behind the headboard of the bed, small enough to be invisible but powerful enough to pick up conversations throughout the room. Military surplus, acquired through contacts Finn had made during his service. The USB drive he plugged into Travis's laptop contained financial records, manipulated ones that showed embezzlement from his pharmaceutical clients. The beauty of the fabricated evidence was its believability. Travis lived an expensive lifestyle that seemed disproportionate to his legitimate consulting fees. The fake records simply documented what investigators would assume was already happening. Rhett uploaded the falsified documents to Travis's cloud storage, backdated them to look like they'd been there for months. Then he sent copies to Travis's biggest client, Meridian Pharmaceuticals, along with an anonymous tip to a pharmaceutical industry watchdog blog. The email to Meridian was simple: "Thought you should know what your consultant has been doing with your money. Check the attached records." The blog post he submitted was more detailed, outlining how pharmaceutical consultants often overcharge clients and skim profits through shell companies. He included Travis's fake records as supporting evidence. Then he deleted all traces of his activity from Travis's computer and left the room exactly as he'd found it. Back in the lobby, he watched Travis emerge from the conference, still smiling and shaking hands. The man had no idea his world was about to collapse. Rhett's phone buzzed as he walked to his truck. A news alert from the pharmaceutical blog. Meridian Pharmaceuticals consultant under investigation for financial irregularities. By the time Travis returned to his room that evening, his phone would be ringing with questions he couldn't answer. The call came at 9:47 p.m. Rhett sat in his truck outside Travis's office building, the listening device receiver in his lap. For 3 days, he'd monitored conversations, learning the rhythm of Travis's panic as his professional life crumbled. Meridian Pharmaceuticals had terminated their contract. 2 other clients were demanding audits. Travis's business accounts were frozen, pending investigation. Now Laney's voice crackled through the receiver, tight with fear. "You promised it'd be clean," she said without preamble. "You said the kid wouldn't touch them." Travis's voice was sharp with desperation. "That wasn't my fault. You were supposed to send them when Rhett was alone. Don't blame me, you coward. I baked them for him, just like we planned." Rhett's finger hovered over the record button on his phone. Every word was being captured by the listening device, but he wanted his own copy. "Insurance. This is falling apart," Travis continued. "The investigation, the frozen accounts. We need to disappear. With what money?" Laney's laugh was bitter. "I already spent most of what we had setting this up. The insurance payout won't come for months." "You said you were sending the cookies to Rhett," Travis said, his voice breaking. "You said he'd eat them after work when Bodhi was asleep. Plans change. The boy got hungry. I couldn't stop him without looking suspicious." Rhett's hand clenched around the phone. She was talking about Bodhi like he was an inconvenience, a complication in their plan to murder his father. "We killed a kid," Travis whispered. "A 9-year-old kid." "We killed the wrong person," Laney corrected. "But Rhett's still breathing, and that's our problem." The recording continued for another 10 minutes. Details about the poison ricin extracted from castor beans Travis had access to through his pharmaceutical connections. How they planned to split the insurance money and disappear together. How Rhett's death would have looked like an accident, a tired worker eating contaminated food. "The ricin was easy to get," Travis was saying. "Castor beans are legal to buy. You just need to know the extraction process. And you made sure there was enough." Laney asked, "More than enough? The dose I gave you would have killed a man twice Rhett's size. The kid only ate a fraction of it, and look what happened." "Don't call him the kid," Laney snapped. "His name was Bodhi. Whatever. The point is, the plan would have worked if you'd followed instructions. I told you I couldn't wait." Rhett was getting suspicious about the money transfers. "We had to move fast, and now we're fucked. The insurance company is going to investigate. The police are asking questions. My business is falling apart because of your impatience." Rhett listened to them discuss his son's death like a failed business transaction. No remorse, no grief, just anger about inconvenience and lost profits. When the call ended, Rhett sat in the darkness, processing what he'd heard. His wife hadn't just betrayed him, she'd murdered their son through carelessness and greed. And Travis saw Bodhi's death as nothing more than a complication in their plan to kill his father. The recording would be enough to convict them both. But Rhett wasn't interested in justice anymore, that he was interested in revenge. The kind that couldn't be appealed or overturned. The kind that would hurt them as much as they'd hurt him. Finn Maddox lived in a single-wide trailer on the outskirts of town, where the city limits met the forest and questions weren't asked. Rhett hadn't been there in 5 years, not since their last fight about Finn's drinking and the things he'd done overseas. But today, he parked his truck next to Finn's rusted Jeep and walked up the gravel path. Finn answered the door shirtless, a beer in his hand despite the early hour. His younger brother had aged hard in the past few years. The army had carved lines into his face, and the bottle had deepened them. "Well, shit," Finn said, studying Rhett's face. "You look like someone died." "Someone did." Finn's expression sobered. He stepped aside, letting Rhett into the trailer's cramped living room. Empty bottles covered the coffee table, and the air smelled like stale cigarettes and regret. "I heard about Bodhi," Finn said quietly. "I wanted to come to the funeral, but they killed him." The word stopped Finn mid-sentence. He set down his beer and turned to face his older brother fully. "What do you mean?" Rhett told him everything. The poisoned cookies, Laney's affair, the insurance policy, the recorded confession. With each detail, Finn's face grew harder, more focused. "You call the cops?" Finn asked when Rhett finished. "No. Why not?" Rhett looked out the trailer's small window at the trees beyond. "Because cops mean trials. Trials mean lawyers and plea bargains, and maybe Laney gets 15 years if we're lucky. Travis gets less because he didn't actually bake the cookies. And that's not enough. That's not nearly enough." Finn was quiet for a long moment, studying his brother's face. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need? A clean van. Silence. And a fireproof bag. Finn walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Behind the beer and expired condiments, he pulled out a metal lockbox. I've got the van, he said, opening the box to reveal cash, fake IDs, and a cell phone. Had it ready for when I finally decided to disappear myself. And the rest. Finn's smile was cold and familiar. It was the same expression he'd worn when they were kids and someone picked on Red at school. Protective and dangerous in equal measure. Little brother, I spent 3 tours learning how to make problems disappear. A fireproof bag is the least of your worries. Lainey's phone buzzed while she was filing insurance claims at work. A text from Rhett. We need to talk. Just us. Tonight. She stared at the message, her stomach clenching with unease. Rhett had been distant since the funeral, but she'd attributed it to grief. Now, something in the tone of his text felt different. Dangerous. She typed back. About what? About us. About starting over. Meet me at the cabin on Lake Serene. 8 p.m. The cabin belonged to Rhett's uncle, a rustic place they'd visited a few times during their marriage. Remote, quiet, surrounded by trees. A place where they could talk without interruption, or where no one would hear her scream. Lainey pushed the thought away. Rhett was grieving, not suspicious. She was being paranoid. At T7:30, she drove the winding road toward Lake Serene. The cabin sat on a small rise overlooking the water, its windows dark against the evening sky. Rhett's truck was already there. She parked beside it and walked up the wooden steps to the front door. It was unlocked. Rhett? She called. Stepping into the main room, he sat at the small dining table. A manila folder spread open in front of him. Photos scattered across the wood surface. Come look at this, he said without looking up. Lainey approached slowly, her heels clicking on the cabin's wooden floor. The photos came into focus as she got closer. Travis with another woman at a restaurant. Travis kissing someone else in a hotel parking lot. Travis with his arm around a blonde in an expensive dress. Where did you get these? She whispered. Does it matter? Rhett looked up at her finally, and the expression in his eyes made her step back. How long have you known? Known what? That he's been cheating on you. That you're not the only woman he's promised to run away with. The photos felt like physical blows. In each one, Travis looked exactly as he did with her, intimate, possessive, promising. This one's my favorite, Rhett said, pointing to a photo of Travis with his arm around a young brunette. She's got 3 kids. Single mom. He told her he'd help her start over too. Lainey sank into the chair across from him, her legs suddenly weak. These could be fake. Photoshopped. Could be. Rhett pulled out his phone and pressed play on audio file. But this isn't. Travis's voice filled the cabin. Look, you're not the only woman in my life, okay? I got options. If this thing with your husband goes sideways, I'm not going down with you. The woman's voice responding wasn't Lainey's. It was younger, desperate. But you said you loved me. You said we'd be together. I say a lot of things. Doesn't mean I mean them. Lainey's world tilted sideways. The man she'd killed for, the future she'd sacrificed her son for, was a lie. We can start over, Rhett, she said, tears streaming down her face. It was all for us. For our future. Rhett stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. There is no us. There's only you. And a grave. The words hit her like ice water. She looked up at his face and saw something she'd never seen before, not anger. Not hurt, but cold calculation. Rhett, what are you? The world went black. When she woke, she was in darkness. Cold concrete beneath her, rope around her wrists and ankles. The smell of dampness and mold filled her nostrils. She was in a basement. Alone. Above her, she heard footsteps. A door slammed. An engine started and drove away. And then silence. The Stillwater Lodge sat on 30 acres of Idaho wilderness, accessible only by a private road that wound through thick forest. Travis had bought it 6 months ago as an investment property, a place where wealthy clients could hunt and fish in privacy. Now, it was his hideout. Rhett and Finn crouched in the tree line, watching the cabin through binoculars. Lights spilled from the windows, and Travis's Mercedes sat in the gravel driveway. Motion sensors on the approach, Finn whispered, pointing to small devices mounted on trees. He's paranoid. Good reason to be. They'd been watching for 2 hours, mapping the property and counting exits. The lodge had 3 doors and a dozen windows, but only one way in or out by car. How do one do this? Finn asked. Rhett studied the building. Travis was inside, probably making calls, trying to salvage what was left of his life. He had no idea death was 50 yards away in the forest. Quiet. No shots unless we have to. Finn nodded and began unpacking his gear. Rope, zip ties, duct tape. Tools acquired during his military service and never returned. They moved through the forest like ghosts, avoiding the motion sensors and approaching from the lodge's blind side. A basement window had been left unlocked, careless of Travis, but fear made people sloppy. The basement was dark and full of hunting equipment, rifles mounted on walls, a freezer humming in one corner. They moved carefully up the wooden stairs. The main floor was open concept kitchen, living room, and dining area, all visible from the stairway. Travis sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what the investigation says, he was telling someone. The money will be there next week. Just give me time. Rhett and Finn flanked him from both sides, moving soundlessly across the hardwood floor. Travis never saw them coming. The phone clattered to the floor as Finn's arm wrapped around his throat. Travis clawed at the arm, his expensive shoes scrabbling for purchase on the smooth wood. Don't fight, Finn whispered in his ear. It'll only hurt more. Travis went limp after 15 seconds. Unconscious but breathing, they zip-tied his hands and feet, then carried him to the basement. When he woke 20 minutes later, he was sitting in a chair, rope binding him in place. Rhett sat across from him, patient and still. Where's Laney? Travis asked, his voice hoarse. Safe. For now. What do you want? Money? I can get you money. Rhett leaned forward slightly. I want you to tell me about the cookies. Travis's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. The ricin. How you extracted it. How much you used. How you convinced my wife to kill me. You're crazy. I never. Rhett nodded to Finn, who stepped forward with a propane torch in his hand. The blue flame hissed to life. You killed my son, Rhett said calmly. Whether you meant to or not, you killed a 9-year-old boy. So we're going to have a conversation about that. The conversation lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Travis was dead and the Stillwater Lodge was burning. Rhett stood in the driveway, watching the flames consume the building. Beside him, Finn loaded the last of their equipment into the van. No evidence, Finn said. Fire burns hot enough to destroy everything. Rhett nodded, still watching the flames. In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching, but they'd be long gone before the fire department arrived. One more stop, he said, climbing into the van. Bodie's grave looked small in the morning light. A simple headstone with his name and dates, and below that, beloved son, gone too soon. Rhett knelt beside the fresh dirt, placing a single dinosaur toy, a T-Rex Bodie had loved, next to the flowers. Behind him, he heard footsteps on gravel. Laney stumbled toward him, pushed by Finn's steady hand on her back. 3 days in the basement had left her filthy and broken. Her hair hung in greasy strands, her clothes were torn, and her eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd given up hope. Kneel, Finn ordered, and she dropped to her knees beside the grave. Rhett didn't look at her immediately. He kept his eyes on the headstone, on his son's name carved in granite. Do you remember what you said when he was born? Rhett asked quietly. Laney's voice came out as a croak. Rhett, please. You said he was perfect, that he was going to change our lives. He finally turned to look at her. You were right about that last part. Tears tracked through the dirt on her face. I never meant for him to get hurt. You have to believe that. I believe you. Rhett pulled out his phone and pressed play. I also believe this. Her own voice filled the cemetery air. Plans change. The boy got hungry. I couldn't stop him without looking suspicious. Laney's face crumpled as she heard herself dismissing their son's death as an inconvenience. We killed the wrong person. Her recorded voice continued. But Rhett's still breathing, and that's our problem. You took everything, Rhett said, standing slowly. My son, my trust, my ability to believe in anything good. We can fix this, she whispered. We can go to the police together. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. To what end? So you can spend 15 years in prison and get out to write a book about your tragic story. Rhett looked down at Bodhi's grave one more time. His son would never grow up, never go to college, never have children of his own, never get to experience any of the future Laney had stolen from him. So now I'm taking you. The words were spoken quietly, without anger or hatred. Just a simple statement of fact. Laney looked up at him, then at Finn standing behind her. She saw her death in their faces. "Please," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "So am I," Rhett said. She vanished that night. No body was ever found. The memorial service for Laney was smaller than Bodhi's funeral. The official story was simple: a grieving mother, overwhelmed by the loss of her child, had walked into the forest and never returned. Search teams found no trace of her, and after 2 weeks, the search was called off. The community rallied around Rhett. Meals appeared on his doorstep. Cards filled his mailbox. Co-workers took shifts covering his responsibilities at the plant while he processed his grief. 3 months after the service, Nell helped him organize the Orion program, a foundation dedicated to food safety awareness and school nutrition programs. Named after Bodhi's favorite constellation, it quickly gained support from local businesses and families. "It's what Bodhi would have wanted," Rhett told a local newspaper. He loved learning about healthy eating. This way, his memory can help other kids. The foundation held its first fundraiser at the community center. Rhett stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of supporters, and spoke about loss and hope and moving forward. "Grief changes you," he said. "It takes pieces of who you were and leaves something different behind. But we can choose what that something becomes." The audience nodded along, seeing a brave father channeling his pain into purpose. They didn't know about the foundation's secondary function, a network of information that tracked domestic abusers, child predators, and other monsters who hurt families. Quietly, efficiently, the Orion program gathered intelligence and passed it along to people who could act on it. People like Finn, who'd found a new sense of purpose in protecting the innocent. People like Nell, who discovered she was very good at making certain problems disappear. The foundation's public face was all about education and awareness. But its real work happened in shadows, funded by anonymous donations and staffed by volunteers who understood that sometimes the system wasn't enough. Sometimes justice required more direct action. The package arrived on a Tuesday evening, left on Rhett's doorstep with no delivery truck in sight. Plain brown paper, no return address, his name written in block letters. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a charred piece of pink notepaper. The edges were burned black, but enough remained to see Laney's handwriting. "For my darling Rhett, enjoy these cookies with my love." The note from the original cookie box. The one that should have burned with everything else in his house when he destroyed the evidence. But here it was, delivered like a message from the dead. Rhett turned the paper over in his hands, studying the burn patterns. Someone had pulled this from a fire deliberately. Someone who knew what it meant. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We should talk." Rhett walked to his front window and looked out at the street. Empty driveways, darkened windows, the normal quiet of a suburban evening. But somewhere out there, someone was watching. Someone who knew his secrets, that he thought about Bodhi, about Laney, about Travis's screams in the basement of the burning lodge. He thought about the foundation and its hidden work, about the families they'd protected and the monsters they'd eliminated. He'd build a new life on the ashes of his old one. Found purpose in vengeance, meaning in vigilante justice. Now someone wanted to take that away too. Rhett set the burned note on his kitchen table and smiled. Let them come. He'd learned what he was capable of when someone threatened his family. Now they'd learn what he was capable of when someone threatened his mission. His phone buzzed again. Another text. "Tomorrow. Midnight. Bodhi's grave. Come alone." Rhett typed back without hesitation. "I'll be there." He had work to do.